So are we ready, expert panel, to kick this off, or do you want to give people a few minutes to jump in?
We can give a couple more minutes. That's just
Okay.
fine. Yeah,
All right, everyone. Nice to see a few familiar faces and names.
it's very fun. And new names. Wow, there's a lot of names that I don't know.
Oh,
Even better. Well, not even better, but fun nonetheless.
okay.
That
So
is
let's
fun.
go back.
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Kristen. Story
Right.
Leonard. We've talked before. Yeah. Hmm. Dan, how are you doing? Good to see you.
Thanks. Great to see you, Pete.
Uh-huh. Tom Martini. All right. All right, Kristen, pay attention to the road. That's good. Commuting.
Yeah, don't end up in a ditch, Kristen.
Mhm. And Elaine is back. Elaine
Hi,
was so excited she joined an hour ago.
hi, Pete. Hello, friends. Nice to see you. Thank you so much.
Elaine, did you join an hour ago?
I
That's so zesty, Elaine.
did. Thanks, Lisa. Thank you for announcing it. And what a joy that I had the anticipatory savoring for an hour after
Oh.
seeing smiling face. So
Mhm.
this is great to be with y'all in person and together at the right time.
Already bringing out the positive psychology research. Anticipatory savoring.
All right, Lori, I think we're ready to kick us off if you
All
want
right,
to get into it.
perfect. So, hi everybody. Thanks to all of you so much for joining. I have met some of you, but most of you probably not. I'm Lori Dempscher. I'm the head of growth and client success at Shift Positive. And I am so super excited to be here today because we have a panel of esteemed experts who are here to talk to us about feedback. So the recording is happening. You will all get it later today. There will also be some conversation during the conversation, excuse me, about resources. Those resources will also be linked in the chat. So with that, we'll just get started. So I am going to first introduce our team of experts, and we're going to start with Lisa Sansom, who is joining us today from Ontario, Canada. Lisa is with LVS Consulting. So thank you for joining us, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Great. Next, we have Kevin Wilde, author of Coachability, the New Leadership Superpower. Thank you so much for being here, Kevin. And last, but certainly not least, we have Pete Berridge. Pete is the co-author of Feedback Reimagined and co-founder of Shift Positive 360. So thank you for being here, Pete.
Nice to be here.
And just to give you all kind of a roadmap for what we're going to do today, during this session, we're going to give each of our experts a few minutes to introduce themselves and give us a little bit of insight into what they're doing, focusing on feedback. We'll then ask them some questions. They'll talk to each other. We'll ask you some questions. So let's start with that part, or excuse me, expert feedback. And Lisa, will start with you on this. So please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, I don't know about the word expert. That feels like a really big word right now. Just a tiny little bit about myself is I'm a coach, consultant, speaker, trainer, facilitator. I've been in the field of organizational development for about 25 years now, and feedback has been essential to a lot of my roles. Prior to this, I was a teacher, so feedback has always been very important, and as a parent as well. I got very interested in feedback in the workplace about 10 years ago because of some things that I was seeing in my coaching, plus my own leadership world. And I had some questions about how feedback can be most effective. When I started diving into the research, I couldn't find any answers. Nobody had answered the questions that I had. So after digging around for a couple of years and talking to researchers, reading books, looking in university libraries, I decided I was going to have to go find the answers on feedback. And so I enrolled in a doctorate program. Mad respect for anybody who has done a doctorate program. It is a long, arduous journey. And essentially, I'm very curious about what happens in the workplace when a manager gives in the moment feedback to an employee. I'm not looking at performance appraisals, I'm not looking at anything formal, but what happens in those day-to-day reactions. And I have a whole bunch of things that I'll share about that, but I will save that for further in our conversation.
Awesome. I love it. I can't wait to hear more about that. So Kevin, please. You're muted.
Well, your sound's not
Kevin,
coming.
you're on mute.
Kevin.
Are you not muted? We can't hear you.
Maybe check that the microphone is on the right microphone.
Try that one. Does that work?
There you go.
There you
Now
go.
I hear you. Perfect.
I was cleverly demonstrating feedback there. So
There you go.
But,
Everything is feedback.
Bravo, bravo.
yeah, makes it work better. So Kevin Wilde, 34-year corporate career, General Electric, General Mills, talent development work. And for the last 10 years, since the corporate gig, I've been a fellow at the University of Minnesota, teaching leadership in 2 of their executive development programs, one MBA and one supply chain. Also does some advising in the industry. And as mentioned, I wrote a book on my favorite topic, which is related to feedback, and that's coachability. And I'm sure we'll get into that as well. There you go. Thank you, Pete.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Pete. Or, excuse me, Kevin. And now, Pete, you take us home, please.
Sure. So my background, 20 years in human resources in nonprofit healthcare, and then became a coach in 2006 and went to the same Master of Applied Positive Psychology program that Lisa did. That's where I came across Lisa and met Lisa. And coming out of that as a coach, oftentimes doing 360s and feedback, I came across research that showed that it's not all it's cracked up to be. And that's what my personal experience showed as well. And so I got curious about how it could be done better, especially since I was just exposed to all of this great new research in the field of positive psychology. And that led to then experimenting and creating something at the time I called the Positive Approach 360. And subsequently then, as I kept working with it, years later in 2016, started the company Change Positive and created the Shift Positive methodology. And we've been training coaches and leadership development professionals in this methodology now since 2016. And there's some 250 individuals who have gone through that certification. And I look forward to talking about what some of that research was and how it then helped to inform the methodology. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. So before we get kicked into the meat of this, I want to take a second and tell you, we definitely want audience participation during this session. My colleague, Kristen, is monitoring the chat. So if there's anything that you're like, hey, I want to know more about that, put it in the chat and Kristen will interrupt us, communicate it to us somehow. So please don't be shy on that front. And on that note, let's start this thing. We're going to ask all these questions. Let's start with all of you. What are you curious about? What do you want to make sure these experts on feedback cover? What are you curious about with feedback? Just pop that in the chat and then we'll hear what you have to say.
I'm having the same reaction, Lisa, to the word expert. I just want to be called a panelist.
Well, too bad. I think you're all experts. So this is my language.
You get to decide.
It is. It's a challenge, Pete, because we've both done the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology program, and we know the field is always expanding. There's always more to learn, and wow, yeah, there's a lot out there.
Okay. So it doesn't look like we have a ton of questions coming in.
We did get a couple just now.
Okay, great. Please.
Yeah. So Amy Grail said, I'm interested to know how to be positive, in air quotes, without being just exclusively a cheerleader, which is sometimes hard because sometimes hard conversations need to be had.
And now they're rolling in. This is great.
Yes.
It's a lot. These are good ones.
Jennifer's curious how the impact has been demonstrated with positive feedback. Vanessa wants to know, how can negative feedback be given positively? Tom wants to know, how do you move out of your own way when you have a history with this individual? Something on the windshield. That's a great one. Michael wants to know, how does the shift positive approach extend beyond the 360 feedback throughout the coaching experience? Lisa wants to know why people are so often afraid of feedback. There's a lot of knowledge about that topic in particular. And also afraid to give feedback, not just receive it. Story wants to know how to handle feedback that you don't want to act on for a legitimate reason. Sounds like there may be a specific instance there. How does in the moment feedback differ from periodic feedback? From Vanessa. And how do we help our people hear more of the feedback? I got a couple more in here. Does trust between the giver and the receiver matter? And is in the moment feedback always in the moment when it comes to timing? Oh, and someone asked about a generational difference in eagerness and openness when it comes to receiving feedback. Great questions.
Awesome. So many great questions here. And we have so much to talk about. A lot of these things we know that we're going to cover during the course of this. So I would say let's just get through this, and then when we have time, we can get to any of these things that we didn't address. Yes? Okay. So again, we're going to start with you, Lisa. Your doctoral research focuses on effective spoken feedback. Yes? So as you're going into this research, you mentioned that there wasn't really anything definitive when you were looking for something. So you're finding a lot of things now. Talk to us a little bit about what you're learning as you're digging into this data.
Sure. We got 3 hours, right? No one else needs to talk. I can just. So my initial interest in learning about this, because I come from a background of positive psychology, is I was really interested in what happens when a manager gives positive feedback in the moment to one of their employees. And I know there's some questions about in the moment. I really am interested in those casual conversations. My background is in public education. I do a lot of consulting. And when I hear from people about implementing new interventions, typically they say we don't have time and we don't have money. And coming from a background in public education, like I feel that. I get what you're talking about here. And yet I have seen in my coaching clients that when they get out of their offices, walk around and catch people doing things right and comment on it and observe on it, they're raising engagement, they're raising connection, they're raising productivity. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that positive feedback works really well. And the education literature is much further ahead than the business literature. The sports psychology literature is way further ahead than the business literature. There hasn't been a lot of work done on this in the workplace. So that's what I got really interested in.
Cool. So looking at that, as you're looking at it and seeing how people in education have been working on this, people in sports have been working on this, do you anticipate that as this piece of the feedback universe, if you will, continues to evolve, it will start being implemented into organizational settings to help with all of the things you were talking about, to help with engagement, to help with leadership development, to help with performance, all of those things?
Yeah, that's certainly my hope. My initial research design was that I wanted to go in and implement a training intervention to teach managers how to give positive feedback. It was explained to me by academics who are smarter than I am that this is actually not a very good research design. So I have changed what I am doing. And now I'm asking people to complete daily surveys, whether or not they received feedback, the type of feedback it was, and how they felt as a result. And were they more motivated? Were they more trusting of their manager? And a whole bunch of other questions. And so the research is the data is coming in. The research is in progress. But I am really looking forward, and there were a couple of other questions in the chat about negative and positive. And so just for the purposes of my research, if I can clarify, positive, when people talk about positive feedback or negative feedback, it's really unclear what they're talking about in the research. Because positive feedback could be, I caught you doing something good, but it could also be interpreted as you feel good about the feedback. So the topic of the feedback is different from the feeling of the feedback. And I would hope that everyone here has had at least one experience where somebody gave you negative or constructive feedback, but you left feeling really empowered. Like you felt positive as a result of this constructive feedback. So I'm also trying to pull that apart so that managers have a better sense of what positive feedback is, how to empower people, how to help them move forward. I think that could result in a lot of great organizational outcomes. And that's what I'm going to find out, I hope.
Well, we can't wait for it. So we're rooting for you. Okay, now, Kevin, in your book, Coachability, the New Leadership Superpower, you discuss the importance of coachability in leadership development. So when leaders are thinking about this, well, first of all, let me ask you, what led you to kind of focus on the importance of feedback with regard to coachability, and then how that impacts leadership?
Yeah, Lori, it's been a topic of mine in the leadership field for over 10 years. And I had a chance to meet Pete and understand the Shift Positive methodology, and looking forward to Lisa's contribution to that. So really a critical thing. But I just want to mention two little studies that got me into this that I think set the stage for my 2 cents into our conversation. One is when I was doing the work on the book on Coachability Leadership Superpower, I did a quick Google search on there's an app called Google Trends where you can put in two search terms and you can see the popularity of one versus the other over a period of time. And so I put in, how do I give feedback? And then I also put in, how does that compare to how do I receive feedback? What do you think the popularity is of one versus the other?
Give is easier than receive, I think.
And 10 to 1. So, the reason that this webinar has been called Giving Feedback is we're all interested. And I just say, hey, I think it's a great topic and it's very important. I love Pete's point of view on this, that notion about how do we do it in such a way that's positively received, to Lisa's point, constructive, and do it really well. Yet, given my research and what I've been into, it sure would be easier to give it if I knew the other side was working on receiving it. So my whole point of view is, from a holistic perspective, let's get better at one, but let's make some investments in the other, whether you are a coach or whether you're a leadership development practitioner. So that's study one. So if you will, the supply of interest is a lot greater than the demand. Do I want it? And I think we need to rebalance that a bit. And then number two, back to my original study, I was the chief learning officer at General Mills. I would meet with a senior team from time to time. We'd look at our top 500 leaders worldwide. And I noticed there was a small segment of our great leaders that stumbled, fell, and we had to let them go. So I started studying derailment. Okay, we got to avoid this, given all the success we've had. And one thing of interest there was I would do a postmortem. I would look at, interview the manager, what went on, why were they great in the first place, what got in the way. But their most interesting was their last 360 of record. And what I found is my derail leaders compared to the overall population was 30 points lower on one question. It almost predicted. And that question was, does this leader seek and respond to feedback? In other words, were they coachable? And so I'm thinking, yeah, maybe we could have done a better job giving over time, but I'm also convinced that they kind of lost that edge, that interest in hearing it and learning it, whether it was well positioned or not. And so that's been my side of why I got into this topic.
That is so fascinating. I didn't expect you to say that. So with that in mind, what advice would you have for people as they become leaders how do they stay coachable so they do not become the derailed leaders?
Well, I think one, just talking about the topic, and again, in the book, and by the way, I think we're going to post my website. I've got a whole page on what's all the research on coachability out there. In my work at the university now, I've been able to do some original research as well as see what's out there on the topic. Lisa's given me some current stuff she's looked at. Like, this is great. I continue to be curious, trying to learn about it. But probably the one thing I'd frame it as is another study I did with a firm that we had 200 leaders, where we did have their assessment on, is this leader coachable or not, against their confidence personality assessment. And we found the relationship of what happens as you go from low confidence to high confidence, your coachability curves. Low coachability, low confidence. In other words, I can't take feedback right now. So I think the first thing is, whether we're a coach or whether we're building the right environment as a leader, is how do you build the confidence? On the other hand, there's what I call the too much confidence, and whether it's hubris or whatnot. And that's my senior leader is very successful. And at least I'm sure you've seen some of the research as well, that once you get to a certain state, you may think, okay, I've arrived, or I'm too busy, or we'll get into this later, like, who are you to give me feedback? That I think needs some curiosity and humility to get back into the middle, which I call a learning zone. And so I think whether it's in a discussion or whether it's in a program or whether it's culture building, to be very clear on how do you build confidence, to be curious and learn to be coachable, to receive feedback, and also let people understand, okay, how do you get in your learning zone? Because you own that. We might create the environment, but you own your learning zone. So I think that notion about how to get people curious, how to get people willing to receive coaching and feedback and learning, whether, again, you're a successful leader or you're about to derail, getting them in that zone is so important.
Awesome. I love that. Interesting. So Pete, let's talk to you for a second.
Okay.
So you co-created Feedback Reimagined and Shift Positive 360. You mentioned that you and Lisa were in the positive psychology program together. So in your creation of these things, how did you integrate positive psychology into the methodology? Like, and why did you take that route? Like, was there research behind it? Did you just like it? How did that happen?
Well, what I didn't like was the experience of sitting down with an executive and going through the traditional 360. As an adjunct coach and using organizations 360s or coaching organizations 360s, the reaction was always the same in a sense. It was, who said this about me? And I've been working on this my whole career. It never seems to change. And it left people more deflated. And that hits home when you're a person that designs those things. When I had a 20-year career developing 360s and feedback systems and performance reviews and 9-box exercises and all that sort of stuff. And so having just come through the positive psychology program, it was like, well, there's got to be some other ways of doing this. And I don't know, when you finish the positive psychology program, you're just like on fire to go out there and try to do something with it. And so having experienced Barb Fredrickson talking about positive emotions, I was like, well, how do you infuse positive emotions in that whole feedback experience? And then thinking about strengths and all the research on strengths so that people feel, and I like how Marcus Buckingham talks about it, that strengths aren't necessarily the things I'm good at. Strengths are the things that strengthen me. So how do we help people to grow from a place of their own strengths and have them take in, and as we talked a little bit earlier about savoring, take in the good things about them. Sometimes it's hard actually to take in compliments and positive reinforcement. And the work that Marty and Chris Peterson had done, Marty Seligman and Chris Peterson, on strengths and the VIA and the research behind that. So I had all these positive psychology ideas in mind and then just started to experiment with them. And I'd have to say one of the most impactful was work by Tony Grant out of Australia. And it goes to the crux of what makes it really hard to give and receive feedback oftentimes is our negativity bias in our physiology, our psychology, and we notice what doesn't work in others for us. And we're ultimately super aware of any sort of negative feedback because of that negativity bias. And he had this little bit different way of doing that. And that is, he did experiments around problem focused coaching and solution focused coaching. And when providing solution focused coaching on what do you want, what would it be, and similar to David Cooperrider talking about a desired future, it created more positive emotions, more positive affect. It created more creativity. It created more ideas on what a person could do. And then it also created what Kevin was talking about in terms of like self-esteem, or in this case, self-efficacy of, oh, I think I could pursue that. And so that was really one of the key components that influenced me in thinking there's got to be a way to weave this in to this whole feedback experience. And so that was a core part of it, was the whole idea of the positive psychology research and weaving it together. And then really the second part was about the importance of social support of the other. Right now, we think oftentimes the feedback is about them, about that person. When in fact, as Buckingham and others talk about, it's relative and relational to the person providing it. It's not truth. It's simply our preferences in working together. And if we can help people to understand that and to go a little bit further to actually become an ally and help that individual understand it and support them, it can have a totally different experience. So there's lots in that, but if you had to boil it down, it's the positive psychology and the social support is what I got most interested in and started to experiment with. Yeah.
Okay, so then you actually did it though. You built this Shift Positive 360 assessment, which is different than the traditional 360s out there. It just is.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've been doing it, you said, I think since 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done any research or seen any research that proves the efficacy of this approach versus the traditional way?
Yeah. So we're really happy that in November, a researcher at the Love Lab at Claremont University in California took data from progress surveys that were done on leaders that had received the Shift Positive 360. And those were clients of people who had been certified in the Shift Positive 360. They weren't my clients, or it was this whole community of 250 coaches. And they took the data and correlated, got feedback on, did those people actually improve? So having gotten the Shift Positive 360, did they make progress in their professional development goals? And the outcome of that was actually really quite buoying. And it was that there were 544 evaluations of 94 leaders. And I had come across research that showed that almost 40% of feedback interventions actually result in poorer performance, not better. In this case, 100% of those leaders made substantial improvement in their professional development. Out of those 544 evaluations on those 94 leaders, 526 of those evaluations showed positive improvement. So 97% of the actual individuals that were asked later, did this leader grow in their goals? The answer there was yes. So that was pretty remarkable. That was pretty empowering and exciting to see.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. So thank you all for talking about your specific areas of focus. Now I just have some higher, broader questions that I'm going to address to the group. So answer them, work together, do whatever you want to get this information out there to our lovely audience. So just like Pete was talking about a second ago, we have seen that traditional feedback models are being challenged. And there's new research out there that shows that there are more effective approaches, like what all of you are doing from where I am. So what are some common misconceptions about traditional feedback practices that you see? And how can these new methodologies, how do they address those? Any of you? Jump in.
I think the big myth that comes to mind for me is the feedback sandwich. which I can see Pete already laughing about the feedback sandwich. Kevin, too. The feedback sandwich, for people who don't know, is like say something good, say the real feedback, which is the thing you did bad, and then say something good to kind of cushion the end of it. And there's a ton of research out there showing that it doesn't work for a couple of really important reasons. And people smarter than me have written about this. But basically, it's predictable. It destroys trust. It feels formulaic. Somebody asked, I think it was Jill, about the importance of trust. Trust is so important when it comes to delivering feedback. It is, Tom, hard to swallow. Because one of two things is likely to happen. First of all, people won't hear the good at all. They'll only focus on the bad, and they'll think you're very insincere for having delivered things in this way. Or you might have somebody who's rather full of themselves and think, two goods, one bad. I'm winning. That's 2 out of 3. I'm doing just fine. So, like, when I'm coaching leaders, I will offer to them, like, just give the feedback you're going to give. It's way better to be honest and straightforward and just say what you're going to say. Pete and Kevin, I'm really interested in your experiences as well around other feedback models or the sandwich or what you've come across.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there is a misnomer, though, about the idea of like radical candor or radical transparency, because I think it misses something. I think it misses that negativity bias, and that it really, even if it seems logical or, gee, we're grown up here, we ought to be able to just tell each other what we need to be able to say. It has a miss, and that is that, you can't not have the signal come through your brain the way that it's going to come through your brain. So I think the real work then is in trying to be clear and going back to what Tony Grant found, a solution orientation, and also the relative and relational aspect of it, as Buckingham talked about, in terms of, this is what I would like to see. This is what would help from my perspective. And knowing that it's only my perspective, it's not truth. And to be able to do that, take that little half a beat to identify, what do you want? What would you see from this individual? What would make it even better? And when you share that, it's much easier. Oftentimes leaders will like blurt it out because it's so uncomfortable and think, well, I did my job. They needed to know. And they should be able to see that as a gift and be able to make that change. But if you just drop a problem on somebody, you still leave them wondering, what am I supposed to do? Improve your communication or be more open. Well, what does that mean? Establish trust with your team. What does that mean? And so just by taking that little bit of time and thinking, well, what I really would like is that you pause and use people's first names. What I'd really like to see is that you hold your own ideas with a little bit of lightness and really be curious about the ideas, the rest of the ideas in the room. And when you do that, it's much easier. And so I think this idea, and I like how I'm taken a little bit by how Buckingham talked about it. And there's a really great article that I'm sure that Andrew's going to be putting in the link there. And but he talks about this radical candor in this way. He says the arguments for radical candor and unvarnished and pervasive transparency have a swagger to them. We think that that's the way to lead. That's the way. But at its best, it's a fetish, and it's only good for correcting mistakes when there really is clearly a better way to do something, and it's known objectively. And at its worst, it can be quite toxic. So I think we always have to keep in mind, okay, this is not truth. This is my preference. And if I move from problem to solution, it's going to help them and it's going to help me.
Great. And Kevin, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I with all respect to Pete, I have some reservations over the full Buckingham point of view on feedback. But it's in moderation. I think it's just fine. I want to talk about 360 for a second. Just not Pete's methodology, just in general. That oftentimes we think that's the way of helping people grow. And one thing that I do both in the classes I teach, as well as I get invited to other professors who are doing leadership courses at the graduate level just before these working adults, for the most part, crack open their own 360. And we talk about coachability, and we do my little coachability assessment to have them think about, okay, this 360 is a point of time. It's a snapshot. I'm a movie. How do I take advantage of this as opposed to this is the final judgment of me? And so we've done some research on what happens when you talk about, again, the demand side. Okay, how do I become coachable as I'm about to receive feedback? I'm about to look at a 360. And if you kind of position things there, I think 360 can be more valuable. But to me, it doesn't stand alone. If you really want to have great behavior change, and to Pete's research and point of view, allyship is such an important part of that as well.
Beautiful. I love it.
And that's
Okay.
and that's why one of the misconceptions I think I want to address is just this idea of confidentiality. You know, if it's confidential, you lose all context. And so, and different people want different things. And so you are left wondering, okay, so does everybody think that I'm a poor communicator? Or the board is looking for something different from that CEO than their CFO is looking for. And so it doesn't make sense to be confidential. And if you can move to being constructive rather than positive, or constructive rather than negative, then it doesn't need to be confidential, is what we find in our work.
Which, Pete, if I could just build on that again, where I'm trying to go with both the people I coach and the programs I'm part of, is it becomes a natural part of your game.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I always call it 360 is an artificial excuse for a good conversation. So at the end of the day, whether it's a conversation with yourself or go talk to your ally, go talk to your truth teller. I remember way back in the day, this is a long time ago, when 360s were first coming out, I was on staff at the GE's Training Center, Crotonville, and 360 back then was so scary that we first produced, we had 60 high potentials in the mid-manager program I was running. We would produce a version of the report that didn't have a name on it. And we'd give it out and say, okay, here's how you read the report. Now read this. This is somebody else. Write on the back of it what advice you'd give this person, right? And then they get their own report, and to some degree that probably helped, prepare people to think about it. And now I'm getting the feedback. I remember one time that we took a break right after giving out the real 360, and one of the students stayed in the room. One of the leaders stayed in the room, and I just checked in, how you doing? And he was stunned. And he said, just somehow by random process, the advice giving 360 without the name on it was me. So he got both copies of it. And so he was giving himself advice. And evidently it must have triggered something that, maybe I should listen to that. So back to, it doesn't stand alone. Having allies and having conversations as a follow-up and seeing it as, okay, I'm a movie. How do I use this for my own growth? Is one of the things I would challenge about the old methodologies of 360s and feedback.
I love that. And I want to then bring this to, I've been seeing some stuff in the chat. We have had some people asking about psychological safety. We all know that psychological safety is crucial for effective feedback. It's crucial for engagement. I mean, we all saw the 2016 Google report or whatever it was. But from the perspectives that the three of you have, what practical steps do you think leaders can take to create a space that is psychologically safe enough to give and receive feedback?
So I have one on the receiving feedback. So I'm going to jump into Kevin's area a little bit, because I'm wondering if you've seen this research. This is from 4 researchers at Harvard, and they did a little piece on asking for advice versus asking for feedback. And what they found was pretty fascinating, because they said when a person asks for advice, the person providing it is more likely to give forward-looking ideas, be more constructive about what they encourage that person to do rather than stop doing, and it's more behaviorally specific. Whereas if they ask for feedback, oftentimes it went more to being negative, what not to do, and backward-looking. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Even the language that you use to be able to say, do you have any advice for me?
And I have it in my book too. I sort of make fun of the word feedback, because it just, as much as we think and we're trying to position it, the little defensive mechanisms go up. So, give me some tips, give me some ideas. I think that's the best language. I just would add to it 2 things. One, in my work, this notion about, well, what do you want to know? So rather than saying, well, how am I doing? Or, give me some tips, to say, you know what, I'm open to anything, but in particular, here's something I'm really interested in, giving better presentations in formal meetings. I'm interested in making sure that my team is feeling a sense of belonging. I'm interested in whatever else. And so always having what I call the pocket question. My favorite pocket question is always, hey, given what we just did, what's one thing I did well I should do again? What's one thing I could do differently next time that would be even better? And I've done that on podcasts. I've done webinars. Pete's given me that coaching too. But I think getting in the habit of, and this is my second piece, I think if you really want to build that culture, you go first. You go first. I'm not just getting trained so I can fix you, but I need to demonstrate it. And so for leaders to start asking those questions, hey, I'm interested in getting better. Or, I just finished something here. I'm trying to pick out my lessons learned and just be more curious. You set psychological safety to the degree that you're helping in that coaching model about confidence enough to ask, and then humble enough to be curious to improve. And I think the more we can have senior leaders, just one final thing. When I was doing 360 work at General Mills as part of our work, the CEO and the senior team went first. And I just think it's very short-sighted for leaders to say, yeah, those people down there, they need that work. But no, you go first. You role model it. And I think if you role model it in a very positive way, I think that sets a tone for everyone else.
Awesome. I love that. Lisa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. When Kevin and I met, we spoke about some of the research that I've been reading, and there's this construct in the research that's called feedback-seeking behavior. And it is much, much easier for leaders to give feedback to employees if employees are asking for it, if they're seeking it. And there are two preconditions to feedback-seeking behavior. There are other ones, but the two main ones that come up is an employee needs to trust their manager, and that is like, fully trust them, right? Trust that you got my back, trust that you care for me, trust that other people trust you. Like, why would I trust you to even ask you feedback? And the second one is employees need to see their managers as being competent at their jobs, competent at understanding my job, competent at giving feedback. And so the first thing that managers should do is build that relationship of trust and competence. If those foundations are not there, then any feedback that they give to anybody, solicited or not, is likely to fall flat. And so I would say, and again, I see some people writing in about trust and psychological safety and growth mindset. These are all preconditions leading up to feedback. If the very first interaction that a manager has with an employee is, here's something you did wrong and here's how to fix it, probably not going to go over all that well, no matter how well it is delivered.
Or the intent behind it. Even if they're like, I'm just helping to try and make you better, right? Because of the negativity bias that Pete talked about and all of that.
Well, employees need to know that their managers care. They care about their growth and development and care about me as a person and care about my career, and that they see me and that they understand what I'm here for. Yeah, without any of that, the feedback is probably not going to go well. And that's one of the things I love about Pete's Shift Positive 360 is it creates that by asking allies how they are going to be actively involved in helping the target of the 360 grow and develop. And so it's building those relationships and it's building that community. It's helping other people be invested in it, which feedback should be. I mean, feedback really should be the opening of a conversation, not just a one-way directive.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
I like that saying of with the right intent, you can share any content.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes the challenge for the feedback provider is to get in a place where their true intention is that they want that other person to be successful, that they care about that person, like you said. And then you don't have to worry about the language so much. It's going to come through. Your intention will come through more than your words will come through. And so oftentimes when coaching a leader and they're struggling with one of their staff, it's like, okay, are you just trying to get it off your back? And you want them to change, or you really care about them and you see that you can be helpful to them.
I love that. Okay, now we're going into the future-ish, present and future. So the world is changing so very fast today. And with it, so is the workplace. So AI is coming about. AI continues to develop and evolve. With you guys being experts, take the word, please, because I believe it, on feedback. How do you see AI influencing that already? Like, what will there be advantages? Will there be drawbacks? Like, how do you guys see this new technology force impacting how people provide and receive feedback?
Yeah, Lori, I'd be happy to tee this one up to start with, and just one little
Please.
piece. So, ran a little experiment. So one thing we do in some of our training programs at the university is we do the classic feed forward exercise, right? Pick something you want to work on, get ideas from others and all that. So what we did in a number of classes, I mean, these were all working adults going to graduate school. I said, tell you what, let's split the class in half. And so in total, we had about 100 people over the semester. Half of them, they got their input on how to get better just using ChatGPT. And the other half, we went out in the hallway and we did the mingle exercise, and you got a bunch of ideas. You went back in, and then as we did the debrief, we did a survey. And two of the data points came out. One was, to what degree are you satisfied with the ideas that were generated? Both groups equally satisfied. So when it comes to generating information, you could ask someone or you could get it online. And I think that will probably be true in the future. The interesting thing was the second question had a big difference. And the question is, are you committed to follow up on any of these ideas? Big difference. Those that had the human connection were much more likely to follow through on one of the ideas. And so I think, again, I think the tools will evolve, but I think that human connection builds the kind of commitment that's going to help us grow. And while I think there's some psychological safety of being at your laptop and getting ideas and deciding what to do, that growth happens, I think, with human connection.
So interesting.
That just makes me think
Either of the other two?
That just makes me think about, Lisa, your work there in terms of what I was really struck by was the topic of feedback is different than the feeling of feedback. And so if you're, if the topic of feedback is helping a manager to understand how do I say something, but the feeling of feedback is how do I show up with this person to offer feedback, that's going to be crucial. It'll be really fascinating to see what comes from your research around how do you measure, how do you describe the feeling of feedback that is most helpful. Yeah.
And I've got people assessing a whole bunch of different emotions that they felt as a result of receiving this feedback. The other thing, and Lori, I know you didn't ask specifically about this, but I've built it into my research survey. Originally, when you were describing my research, you said spoken feedback, and that is where I started, but I realized that's not always where people are getting their feedback in today's workplace. So I am asking how you received the feedback. Was it spoken or was it written? So is it text, Slack message, whatever. But I'm also asking my participants, how much do you see your boss in the office? Are you remote? Are you hybrid? Are you in person? And I'm hoping for a few hundred people to answer my survey so that I can really pull these groups apart and find out, does the channel through which you're receiving your feedback, be that positive or negative, affect anything? Does how much you see your manager affect anything? The more people I get taking my survey, the easier it's going to be for me to pull these groups apart and see if there are any significant differences. So I'm actually hoping to contribute to that knowledge, because a lot of what we're doing in the workplace is so new, it just hasn't been tested yet.
Wonderful. And I just noticed in the chat, Andrew posted a link to your survey. So
Thank
for
you,
any of
Andrew.
you out there who aren't looking at the chat and you do want to participate in Lisa's survey, there is a link out there that you can access it.
Yeah, please
Share
do.
it with whoever you want.
Please do, because that would be very helpful. In terms of AI, I mean, we've already gone down that road at Change Positive in that we have developed an AI feedback assistant that is one that you can have those conversations with. And the difference, what I find important with the AI, and Kevin and I have had some conversations about this, is If you're just using AI with Chat or Claude or one of those, it's going to use the whole world of information. And that means it's grabbing a lot of bad information about feedback, traditional information about feedback. And so what you can do is train it in your specific methodology. And so we've done that to create a little GPT that you can talk to. And it's great for managers who normally would be going to HR and saying, hey, I'm struggling with this employee. Can you help me to come up with some feedback and so forth? Now they can just simply interact with the GPT, and it's going to take them through a little bit of understanding of what makes for constructive feedback, ask them what the issue is. It then asks them, what is it that you appreciate about this person, to get them into that creative mindset of strengths. What is it that you'd like to see them doing instead of what you've described? And so it is a way of getting them to that solution orientation. And then how are you going to help them? How might you help that individual? And then you can even practice the conversation with them. And it'll give you feedback on how it comes across and suggestions. And the cool thing is that you can even we can build it in such a way that it will take into account the values or leadership principles or competencies of a particular organization, customize it for them, and then it's going to frame that feedback using their own internal language, which can be really great. It's a way to take those competencies down to the next level of individual conversations. So that's one tool we've developed. Another is called the Shift Positive 360 AI, which is actually available on our website. And it is the full Shift Positive 360, but the interviews, instead of being conducted by a coach or a leadership development professional, are actually conducted by the AI assistant itself. And so it's a way of scaling, which has been the biggest request of our organization. How do you scale this for larger groups or for those that really can't afford, like nonprofits and independent schools and such? So it's coming fast.
Very, very encouraged at what Pete's doing in that front. And I just want to add, if anyone's interested, I also created a GPT, a little bit of Pete's coaching on it with all of my, not just the Coachability book, but also 3 years of blogs and studies and whatnot. And one of my favorite little functionalities is that question, and I've got a prompt in there that, I just got some feedback. I don't know what to make out of it. And it leads you through some questions on how to think about it and getting to a constructive place. So I think there's something there, but I want to go back to the bigger message that as much as we're going to get to scale, we're going to be able to, put information out there in a way. I still think we can't lose the human touch and the human connection, whether that's a coach, that's an ally, that's a friend. And maybe we can do it with a Teams or a Zoom meeting, but I don't think we can lose that element.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're kind of coming to the end of our hour together. I saw one question that it looks like Kirsten Hallen had in there, and it just seems like an interesting one to tee up, that she wants to know, how do you tee up the feedback conversation without immediately stating what the issue is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just have that belief that we need to state what the problem is, don't we? And having done this now for a long, long time, really the work is on the solution side. And it's really interesting in looking at that research by Tony Grant about not even diving into the problem. There's a saying within solution-focused coaching: the solution doesn't care why the problem occurred. And it's so different for us to even wrap our minds around. But if you take that little pause and you say, here are the things that are going well, here's what I'd like to see next. Here's what I think is going to make you even more effective. And it comes through with that personal caring and intention. Then if the person wants to dive into the problem and say, well, help me understand, when didn't that work, or why didn't that work, and so forth, great. But that's them then holding accountability and responsibility for that themselves, rather than you believing that, I have to tell them how bad it is in order to then share with them what to do. And frankly, just from experience, we find you really don't need to tell them what's broken. You need to be clear about what would be better, what's next, what's their development, what's their growth from your perspective, and only from your perspective. Yeah.
If I can add on top of that, Kirsten, there's some really interesting research that came out in the past few years about the feedback receiver and where they are on their learning curve with the particular task that you're providing them with feedback on. And the research is very early, but the original research is showing that if someone is a novice at a task, and by which I don't necessarily mean they're just a new employee, you might have somebody who's a 20-year veteran, but you're giving them a new task to do. If somebody is new at something, they benefit much more from positive feedback. If somebody is experienced at a task, they've done it over and over and over again, and they've reached a level of mastery, it turns out that they benefit more from negative feedback, from being pointed out what it is that they're doing wrong. The researchers are hypothesizing that this has to do with commitment. So let's imagine that I decide I'm going to start playing the violin and I want to get good at it. That is a lot of time and energy that I am investing. And as a newbie, I'm going to benefit much more from encouragement and positive feedback about what is going well, because that's going to help me decide I want to commit to playing the violin. But once I get to some level, and this is subjective and arbitrary, at some point, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm good enough. I don't need other people telling me I'm doing a good job. I know when I am doing a good job. I need other people to tell me when I'm not doing a good job and how to get better at it. And that's when I really do need to learn from the people who are much, much better than me. And they can get really picky about those little incremental improvements. And so some of the research is saying, yes, to Pete's point, absolutely, you need to move forward and tell people what to do and how to get better. But adjusting your feedback for where that person is on their learning curve and what they need can also be extremely beneficial when it comes to helping people grow and develop.
I think that, as Lisa shared there with me the week we were talking, it's like, oh, situational leadership. Does that apply to coaching and feedback too? Yeah, probably. The one thing I would add is that little coachability assessment that I've got, we were revalidating it a while ago. And the psychometrician that helped me said, hey, what's interesting is the highly coachable leaders answered a couple questions very differently than everyone else. And some of them had to do with feedback is critical for me to achieve my goals. Feedback is critical for me to continue growing and development, so that connection from what's important to you, what matters to you, is where that learning zone opens up. And I think both as a giver and receiver, being conscious of that is helpful.
Thank you.
There was on that whole area there, though, of the positive praise. There's a one that I just read from Zenger and Folkman in 2021. Why do so many managers avoid giving praise? Mm-hmm. And what they found is that managers are seen as more effective when they give praise, yet managers think that they're more effective when they give negative feedback or corrective feedback. And so this idea that they vastly underestimate the power and necessity of positive reinforcement and overestimate the value and benefit of negative or corrective feedback. So they become quick to criticize and slow to praise. And just that phrase stuck with me. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't offer the positive praise because maybe they're not doing everything right, instead of catching them in the moment that they are doing something right, so that it creates that momentum. Yeah.
All right. Well, I just want to take the last couple minutes and thank all of you for hanging in there, our audience. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions. It's so valuable to have people with whom to share this. To our panel, you are all so learned. You are all so versed in the work that you do. Thank you, thank you, thank you sincerely for taking the time to get on here, talk with each other, answer my questions, answer some of the audience's questions. I'm confident that this was so valuable to everyone who was here. I know it certainly was for me. And I appreciate it very, very much. And we'll look forward to the next time.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thanks very much.
Hi, Kathleen.
Thank you. Really helpful, guys. Really interesting.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you.
Beautiful job.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
It's fun stuff.
Are Pete and Kevin going to be at the TC Sherm conference this year? Because that's where I met you last year.